Hello, and welcome to the Albright Scholar for July 2023. My name is John Pankratz. I teach history at Albright, and each month it's my privilege to welcome BCTV viewers and residents of Greater Reading to take a glimpse inside our learning community up on North 13th Street, to look at the work being done by teachers and students, and to think about its impact on all of us. Well, we are in the middle of a hot and wet summer here in Reading, Pennsylvania, and we're going to talk about another hot and wet place in the course of our conversation. Many Albright students and faculty members have teamed up to perform creative research under the auspices of Albright's ACRE program, Albright's Creative Research Experience. And we had guests on in June, and I'll have some more guests on in August and September to talk about that. But today we're going to put the emphasis on creativity. So not biochemistry and not even psychology, but theater and playwriting in particular. My guests are students Kenya Muhammad and Professor of Theater Julia Matthews.
Hi.
Welcome to the Albright Scholar.
Thank you.
Now, Julia, I think I've had you on the show before at some point here.
Probably, that's right.
So, Kenya, you're a newcomer to it. But let me ask an easy question. Why, when you could do almost anything, would you spend the summer doing the hard work of learning about a community and transforming that into theater?
Well, it's something I really wanted to do, so it doesn't really feel like work to me because it's something I love to do, and so I was just really interested in this, and so I wanted to make it a thing, make it a reality, so it doesn't feel like work.
Good. So the ACRE came along as a great opportunity to do that, to accomplish that dream.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, and Kenya came to me and said she was interested in doing this project and could we apply for an ACRE grant, and I thought, wow, that sounds terrific. So
no, I love that initiative. I mean, sometimes faculty members will have a long-standing project in mind and say, oh, this student would be really great for this, but sometimes the impetus comes from the student herself, and I think that's super. That's super. Well, you're, how would you describe the project, the play you're writing and the place you've learned about?
How would I describe it? I would say it's a very interesting and wild time. So that putting that into this is just a very interesting and wild play and a wild experience, and just making that and trying to be as dramatic as possible. Yeah. So I would just describe it as wild.
Yeah, you're creating a play that's set in, I think, the 1990s or
the 80s.
The 1980s in the Overtown neighborhood of Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
Wow, it's a place I've never been, but you're from Miami, right?
I am from Miami, and a lot of my family is from Overtown. So I never lived in Overtown, but hearing from their stories, is where the inspiration for writing the story came from.
Okay. And it's an unusual and interesting community, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of background on the place?
Well, in I think the 60s, the 30s to the 60s, this was known as the colored town because a lot of the black community in Miami lived in that town. And so during that time, it was like thriving, it was well off. A lot of famous black performers lived there, like Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, and just a bunch of other people. So it was a very rich historic place during that time, and then it just kind of spiraled down since Interstate 95 came in. So
like it did to so many cities along the East Coast, right? New York, the Bronx. I mean, I-95 is somewhat responsible for the creation of rap music, simply because of the job that it did on the South Bronx, but it harmed Philadelphia as well. It was called Colored Town, not because it was an old neighborhood where the property values had declined, but it was built that way, right? When the railroad connected Miami to the rest of the nation, many of the workers were black, and they needed someplace to live, and
that's where they lived.
given the Jim Crow South and segregation, this neighborhood was created for the black community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, one of the ironies of Jim Crow segregation is that the black community, left on its own, creates its own middle class and its own thriving businesses and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then it becomes broken by the 1980s.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, really started at the early 70s. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Julia, what about Kenya's project attracted you?
Oh, well, Kenya mostly. But then also, it's been fascinating doing the preliminary research with Kenya, because before she really started putting pen to paper, she did a lot of investigating into the history of Overtown and history of Miami, and that's all been a great learning opportunity for me. I didn't know about Overtown, and it's a great story. And I've never been to Miami either, so this has all been, you know, like learning about a new place and learning about a new sort of moment in history, because the added to the richness of Overtown is the stress of the drug wars in Miami in the 1980s, and this astonishing sort of injection of drugs and weapons and money and just illegal actors on every front. Calling them the cocaine cowboys. Kenya, one of the interesting parts of our research was a conversation that Kenya arranged with a former police chief who said that who worked in narcotics in the 1980s, and said that the criminals were, you know, way oversupplied, overarmed, much, you know, that they were much better armed and more dangerous than the police could possibly be, and that some of the things that we've read were just really astonishing, the level of anarchy almost.
Oh. And this enormous flow coming in, because Miami was the entrepot for all the drug-producing regions of Latin America.
Right, right there on the coast. It's perfectly situated for all that boat traffic to be coming in, and we read some wild accounts.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess it would be possible simply to write a history about this moment and some of the forces and some of the actors, but you chose to write theater instead.
Yeah, because that's what I'm familiar with. That's how I, perform. That's how I tell stories. And I think telling this story through theater is different because you have the audience like right there. Yeah. So, that's just how I chose to tell the story.
And you have to create particular characters for the audience to resonate with. Who are the characters in it? Does your play have a title yet?
Oh goodness, no.
Okay, we can hold off on that. That can come.
But the characters right now are Gloria, that's the mother, and then she has her children, the twins, which is Tanya and Teresa, and her son is James, and the auntie is Donna, and our villain is Miss L. And we have another character called Officer Keith. And, yeah.
Okay. So it keeps that kind of tight focus that theater sort of needs in order to tell its story, and then they have a whole world swirling around them.
Yeah.
And I guess the play must make reference to those pressures in that world.
Definitely.
Out there as well.
So to connect it to the time.
Yeah, it's an interesting project that, there's all the family drama elements that there are in any family,
Of course, yeah.
pressures and the changes as children are growing up and wanting to be more independent.
And being a twin, gosh, that's a drama in itself, right?
Yeah.
But then also these external pressures that are kind of encroaching on the family, that I think Kenya's been really thoughtful and astute about how the larger pressures are affecting the sort of micro world of this family and in their apartment and their circumstances. So that's been fun. Yeah. Well, you've got about 6 scenes so far. Is that about right?
I don't know. I
5
feel
or
like
6
I feel like
scenes,
it's a lot of scenes so far, but I think so, about 6 scenes.
Right. So, and it's been steady work. All playwrights are different, and
Yes.
I was not sure how Kenya was going to go about writing a play. Some people, make an outline and start at the beginning and go to the end, and other people start in the middle and
Storyboarding it or
yeah,
something.
any kind of images and voices that they hear in their heads. But Kenya spent a lot of time thinking about the whole plot and how that was going to tie into the research she had done. And so we spent a lot of time kind of kicking ideas around for what if this happens and what if that happens and what does this mean if how does that affect this character or how would that affect that character and then she started pretty much at the beginning and has been writing dialogue scenes and going back and revising and
Okay.
rewriting and extending and I'd say we've got most of the first act, right? We've got almost
Yeah.
the first act, and then the plan is to write a second act as well.
Yeah, yeah. Setting up all those problems and making the audience wonder and worry and feel engaged and then see what happens. Yeah. In many ways, the project reminds me of the work of the great Pittsburgh playwright August Wilson. And he wrote a play for each decade of the 20th century set in his hometown of Pittsburgh. And I think when he said that when he needed to do research besides conversations in his neighborhood, the Hill District, its own kind of overtown, I guess, he went to the Carnegie Library and read through old newspapers and stuff like that. What was your process in terms of the research?
My process was, well, I didn't have newspapers, but I researched a lot of things through the internet. And really through people that actually lived there
Okay,
during that
sort
time.
of oral testimony, oral
Yeah.
history.
A lot of that. I would just listen to their stories and just write things down or record it. So I researched a lot of it through the internet, but I didn't want it to be too much of like, I don't know. Yeah,
docudrama. Yeah.
I wanted real voices about, how it was, what happened, and, how did they deal with that time. So I tried to stick more to like their stories. So.
To listen to that subjective response rather than the statistics or police reports or journalism.
Well, and I suppose it's like any place that's going through a difficult time. So many of the news stories, when we searched Overtown, it was just crisis after crisis, whereas when we're thinking about the people who really lived there, then yes, there are crises, but there are also, joys and jokes and family and
Real life.
and work and all of those things that are also part and parcel of this family's life. So that's been sort of something I think you're giving back to the historical record in a way.
Yeah.
And have you talked with family or have you talked with prominent people? You talked with the police chief?
Yeah, I talked to family, family friends, so the police chief, but mostly family because it has that family aspect to it. So I talked to my mother, and that's what the characters are inspired by. So my mother is a twin, so
Okay.
so the characters are definitely inspired by that, and that her family. So, I talk. That's where it came from.
Great. And have you visited that part of Miami?
I have, and it does not look the
It doesn't look the
same,
way
no.
it did in the 80s or in the 1930s either, right?
No. So I don't get the sense of, what does it feel or what does it look like during that time? But it was still nice to see it, and it's pretty much different, thriving now. But yeah, it was nice to see it though.
Yeah. Is the play going to give us a sense of place? Do you make reference to certain landmarks like the Lyric Theater or particular streets or hot street corners or things like that?
It makes reference to a park that's a lot of people know
Oh,
in,
okay.
in Overtown, Gibson Park. And it says, you know, there's reference to, okay, we're in Overtown, we're in Miami. But I didn't make a reference to the Lyric Theater. I didn't think of that. So I don't know,
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah, well, I guess we can hope that the play is destined to be performed at the Lyric Theater
Absolutely.
That's true, yeah.
Right.
at some point. At some point. Great. And going forward, what is your process with the play as you finish a draft of it? I guess this summer, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Are we going to have an opportunity to workshop it?
Well, during the summer, we're planning to get some actors to do a reading. But once it's done, I would love to actually put the play on. I'm gonna fingers crossed. I hope so. But yeah, that's my plan, to put it on.
Yeah. Well, I think we have every reason to encourage that.
Absolutely.
That prospect, and certainly we've performed student-generated theater in the past.
I didn't know that.
Back in the pre-COVID days, when we filled the theater more regularly. But yeah, I guess I'm not in a position to make any promises. But when you perform it, I'll photograph it for you, so we can.
Thank you.
And of course, is this something you'd want to perform in? That is one of the characters a way for you to express your own perceptions as a young woman?
I don't know. I didn't imagine myself in it, really.
Well, but you could be in it.
I could be in it. If I had to be, I would probably. I would choose to be one of the twins because
Yeah.
I relate more to them.
Yeah, the sisters,
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, I think that's perfectly possible. Although we do have an awful lot of theatrical talent in the student body at Albright, so you have friends that you might want to cast too.
One of the things I find interesting about the play is just its concentration on women and these different women who are trying to make life work. Certainly these two twin sisters who are almost finished with high school and trying to imagine what their future is going to be, but also their mother who's struggling and keeping some secrets from the family that she doesn't want them to be alarmed by, and this female villain, Miss L, who's a sort of beginning drug lord. She's taken it upon herself to move into that space to accomplish some sort of desperate goals of her own. But so there are really interesting roles for different women at different ages, and thinking about just when push comes to shove, what do people do and what will they do?
So the villain is not a simple villain.
No, I think she's so complex, and there's so many different layers to her that I learned while like stepping back and just looking at this character, because I went into it thinking like, this is so difficult. I have to make like this big bad villain, this big evil person, but realizing that, you know, they're not just like evil. There's more
They don't
to
start
them.
out day one saying, I'm going to be a baddie or something.
No, something happened to them to like lead them to this, and just making this her story and just looking into that and just diving deeper into that just made me, you know, get a better understanding that, you know, this is not the big bad villain that I was having so much problem with writing.
Well, do you want to talk about her backstory a little bit? Or
I don't know if that'll give you.
Give us a little hint. Spoiler alert.
Okay, so Miss L is, I gotta think of what to give away. She lives in Overtown just like everyone else, and she had a daughter, and you know, her Miss L being, well, her name is LaShonda, so she didn't start out as Miss L. First, she was LaShonda, and she had a daughter named Aaliyah, and LaShonda being connected to someone in this drug world, you know, something happened to her daughter, and that kind of made her spiral into this kind of drug world where she feels like this will give her power to be able to kind of get revenge for the person that did something to her daughter. So looking at it from her point of view of her being being in this world for one thing, and that's power. And some other people could think of, why does someone want to be in this
Right.
drug world? Why do you want to be a drug lord? And for her, it's like, power to get revenge for her daughter. And that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay. Okay. Well, that already sounds deeply engaging.
It's gripping, isn't it?
And that's what we
Yeah.
want theater to do. It sounds better than a movie because sometimes movie villains are just, they're simply bad. But this, I think we can understand someone who's suffered loss and powerlessness. And if that's the route that seems available to you, to redress those balances. Wow. Okay, this is going to be deep. This is not a comedy.
It's not a comedy, but there is, funny moments because it's a family.
It's
and
life.
Yeah, and, we'd laugh and, joke around about, certain things. So it has its seriousness, but I think, it's also this funny and heartwarmingness of the family. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's sort of been part of your gradual process, going back to scenes and fleshing them out a little more and fleshing them out a little bit more. So where we sort of started with just the main plot, and then as you go back and revise, then we get more details and more humor and more just kind of byplay in between the different characters. We sort of see how this relationship's a little different from that relationship, and those kind of qualitative adjustments that Kenya's making as every time she goes back and takes another pass at a scene, it comes back with more sort of nuance.
Yeah. And it's wonderful, this dialogue that you two have created within the framework of The Acre. It's ideal for playwriting. We mentioned August Wilson, but he didn't just write great plays. He wrote monstrous plays that were 6 hours long, and then he took them off to the O'Neill Center, and then he had a group of very talented people work with him and workshop it and decide what worked and what was too much and extra, and it honed it down to the sort of gem that they became. So you've sort of got that built into this deal.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I know you've already shared with the Acre Lunch the work you're doing. Have you found it interesting to see what other students are learning and researching?
Yeah, some of the things I learned about, like one of the recent lunches, there was a student doing a presentation about climate change, but it was all in Spanish, and I was like, whoa. So just seeing what all the students are interested in, and what they're working towards that, and just seeing them create this thing and this project, it's just like, wow, that's inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many different areas of interest. It just makes your head spin to think all the different things, kind of work that's going on from.
It's really gratifying too.
Yeah.
Because we do have so much expertise on the Albright faculty, and I love it that people are willing to devote their summers to this intense one-on-one kind of research mentoring. But then we have students with genuine curiosity and creativity and the abilities to realize things, to learn a lot, and then to make a lot as well.
Yeah, it's really a special program, and I don't know. I feel really lucky that we were one of the pairs who are able to take part in it this summer, because it's not a done deal. It's competitive.
It's a competitive thing, and always probably twice as many people will apply for Acres as get awarded them.
So, feel pretty lucky to be doing it.
Great. Well, I think we're all going to benefit from this luck. Other people will be publishing research papers and things like that, but we're going to get to see your accomplishments come to life on the stage. And yeah, I'm already planning to be front row.
Thank you.
Great. Well, it's been wonderful having you on the show, Julia. Always
Nice
good
to
to
be
see
here.
you
Yes.
as well. And as I promised, we'll bring in more acre research teams in future episodes of the Albright Scholar. We'll see you then. So long.